It's such a simple word, isn't it? Forgiveness. But it's one of the most profound and honestly difficult things we ever go through as human beings. It's something we all have to deal with, whether we're the one asking for it, trying to give it, or, and this can be the hardest, trying to find it for ourselves. So let's really dive in and explore what it means to forgive.
So where do we start? Well, we're going to begin with this incredibly powerful image from Derek Austin's poem, which is also titled Forgiveness. Just think about that phrase, a seam riven. It just perfectly captures that feeling, right? That feeling of being torn apart by something that's gone wrong, a relationship that's been split right open. And this really gets to the heart of it. This is the central question the poem asks. It's all about restoration, about healing. Can we actually go back to how things were before the hurt happened? That question is going to be our guide as we unpack what forgiveness really is. So to really get a grip on this, let's start with that personal story at the heart of the poem. It's a really raw look at a broken relationship between a father and his son, and it's the perfect place to ground our whole discussion.
And look, the poem does not pull any punches. It talks about these painful memories, a pink stripe, a red lash, the echoes of a physical punishment that's left this deep emotional scar. And then you hear the father's voice asking, can we move past this? That question just hangs there in the air. It shows the huge gap between wanting to fix things and how hard it is to actually let go of the pain. This isn't just theory, it's real life.
Okay, so we have this deeply personal story. Let's kind of zoom out now from that specific pain and ask a bigger, more universal question. And we're going to get a little help from philosophy here. Because, to figure out if we can move past something, we first have to know what we're doing when we forgive. It sounds like it should be simple, right? But philosophers have been wrestling with this question for centuries. Is it just about saying the words, I forgive you? Is it about completely forgetting what happened? Or is it something way deeper, way more complicated than that?
And this is where we hit a major philosophical roadblock. The famous philosopher Immanuel Kant basically argued that forgiveness is, well, impossible. Why? Because when a wrong is done, it's done. It's a fact. It's part of history. You can't just hit an undo button and make it go away. So how can you possibly forgive something that can't be erased?
But what if Kant was asking the wrong question? Enter the philosopher Joanna North, who offers this brilliant shift in how we think about it. She argues that, no, forgiveness is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about dealing with the mess it left behind. It's not about erasing the act, but about getting rid of the toxic effect it's having on your relationship.
Okay, so this chart, based on North's ideas, is super helpful. Let's just walk through it. Forgiveness is not excusing what someone did, it's not condoning it or saying it was okay, and it is definitely not forgetting about it. In fact, to truly forgive, you have to remember and acknowledge the wrong. On the other side, forgiveness is recognizing that wrong, and then, and this is the key, overcoming your own resentment. It's a choice, a will to change of heart. That makes it a sign of strength, not weakness. And here's how North puts it in her own words. I want you to pay attention to the language here. An active endeavor. This is work. It's a conscious choice, a real effort to replace all that bitterness and anger with compassion. It's not a passive thing that just happens to you. It's something you actively do.
All right, so that's forgiving other people. But what about those times when the person who messed up is you? Now we're going to turn inward to the really tricky territory of self-forgiveness.
It's pretty fascinating, actually. Psychologists Julie Hall and Frank Fincham point out that for the longest time, researchers were almost entirely focused on forgiving others. They call self-forgiveness the stepchild of forgiveness research. It was just sort of ignored. And yet, for so many of us, it's the hardest kind of forgiveness there is.
So that's the big question, right? Is forgiving yourself just the same thing as forgiving someone else? Can we just take Joanna North's ideas and apply them to ourselves, or is there something fundamentally different going on here?
Well, here's the definition from their research. Self-forgiveness is a willingness to abandon self-resentment. See the similarity there? Just like overcoming resentment for others. The idea is to foster compassion and kindness, but this time you're directing it at yourself. And this is so important. It only comes after you fully acknowledge what you did wrong.
All right, check this out. This table from their paper shows some honestly pretty surprising differences between forgiving yourself, what they call intrapersonal forgiveness, and forgiving someone else, which is interpersonal. Let's break down some of the biggest ones.
First, the focus is totally different. When you forgive someone else, you're focused on what they did to you. But when you're forgiving yourself, you might be focused on the harm you did to yourself or the harm you did to somebody else. Second, and get this, because this is kind of wild, empathy works in reverse. Empathy for the person you hurt can actually make it harder to forgive yourself, but empathy is the very thing that makes it easier to forgive others. And finally, the stakes are incredibly high. The consequences of not forgiving yourself can be really extreme.
And this all hinges on one absolutely critical idea: responsibility. The research makes a really clear distinction between real self-forgiveness and something they call pseudo-self-forgiveness. That's basically just letting yourself off the hook without actually owning up to what you did. True, genuine self-forgiveness can only happen after you accept responsibility.
Okay, so let's bring all these pieces together, right? We've got the raw emotion from the poem, the logical structure from philosophy, and the deep complexity from psychology. Let's see if we can view forgiveness not as some single event, but as this active, sometimes difficult process of mending.
So if we borrow from Joanna North's work, we can almost see it as a three-step journey. First, you have to acknowledge the wrong. No excuses, no downplaying it, just face it. Second, you have to do the work, that willed change of heart, that active effort to replace the anger with compassion. And then finally, the goal is often to restore the relationship, to accept that person back, whether that person is someone else or yourself.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that beautiful poem by Derek Austin. This line just says it all. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, but it can be a condition of forgetting the pain that haunts you. It's about the stitching of one kind of life to another, the life you had before the hurt and the new one you build after. You're not getting rid of the seam, you're mending it.
So when you boil it all down, what philosophy and psychology both seem to tell us is that forgiveness is an active choice. It's not easy, it's not always even possible, but it is a powerful way to heal. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. If forgiveness is a choice, a way of stitching life back together, what will you choose to mend?